You just teach flight simulators? My dad scoffed, raising his beer glass with a patronizing smirk. I calmly shook my head, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "No, Dad, I fly the real thing." He burst out laughing, a booming sound that filled the crowded military town steakhouse. "Oh yeah? If you're a real combat pilot, then what's your top secret call sign?" I leaned forward over the table, dropped my voice to a whisper, and uttered two words: Shadow Watch. Across the table, my dad's lifelong best friend, a highly decorated, hardened Navy SEAL commander, instantly choked on his drink, slamming his glass down so hard the glass nearly shattered. The color drained entirely from his face, turning him ghost white. He stared at me in absolute terror, his hands visibly shaking. "No way," he stammered, looking at my dad. She's him." He knew exactly who I was. My name is Lauren Hayes, and at 32 years old, I've broken some of the most dangerous sound barriers in the world. But sitting across from my father in that dimly lit steakhouse, the silence felt a lot heavier than Mach 2. It was supposed to be a celebratory dinner, a rare reunion with his old military buddies, but it quickly turned into a familiar stage for my father to perform his favorite routine, completely dismissing my entire life's work. The table was cluttered with heavy plates and half-empty glasses, the air thick with the smell of charred meat and cheap beer, a setting that perfectly matched the tense atmosphere building between us. My father, a retired colonel who measured a person's worth entirely by the dirt on their boots and the blood on their uniform, looked at me with that signature, condescending smirk. To him, my career in the Air Force was nothing more than a glorified, safe desk job. He truly believed that, because my official title involved instructional flight training, I spent my days in a temperature-controlled room, safely bolted to the floor, teaching the real male pilots how to handle a joystick inside a simulator. He had no idea about the classified clearances or the midnight deployments. He just leaned back, chuckling loudly to the waitstaff and the rest of the table, entirely convinced that his daughter was just a glorified classroom teacher playing dress-up in a flight suit. What my father didn't know was that the classroom he imagined was actually a highly classified staging ground for the most lethal black-budget operations in the sky. Officially, my records showed a standard instructional track to keep the paper trail clean. But the reality of my 32 years of life was spent operating under a joint special operations command that didn't exist on any public roster. I wasn't teaching rookies how to take off. I was piloting a cutting-edge, low-observable stealth platform designed for ultra-low altitude close air support. My arena wasn't a simulated screen. It was the dark, hostile airspace over territories where conventional jets couldn't survive. Whenever elite special forces teams found themselves outnumbered, outgunned, and entirely cut off from standard rescue lines, my phone would buzz. Within minutes, I'd be strapped into a cockpit, pushing a multi-million-dollar machine to its absolute limits under the cover of total electronic silence. My job was to slip past advanced enemy radar networks, drop into hot zones without a single radio transmission, and unleash precise, devastating firepower to pull our ground forces out of certain death. To protect the integrity of these top-secret missions, I had to endure the agonizing silence at home, letting my family comfortably believe I worked a boring, 9-to-5 simulator job. Watching my dad smirk, I swallowed the truth, knowing the real wings I flew were paid for in blood and absolute secrecy. The steakhouse grew louder as the night wore on, but our table felt like a pressure cooker. Sitting directly next to my father was Marcus, his lifelong best friend and a legendary Navy SEAL Master Chief. Marcus had recently returned from a brutal, highly classified deployment in a hostile territory, a mission that had quietly ended his active combat career. Unlike my father, who was loud and boastful, Marcus sat in a heavy, watchful silence, his eyes carrying the haunted stare of a man who had stared directly into the abyss and barely made it back alive. My father completely ignored Marcus's solemn mood, using it instead as an opportunity to ramp up his performance. He loudly regaled the table with exaggerated stories of Marcus's past battlefield heroism, gesturing aggressively with his steak knife before turning his sharp, critical gaze back toward me. In front of the waitstaff, his buddies, and anyone within earshot, my father began contrasting Marcus's lethal combat legacy with my supposedly safe, comfortable classroom job. He joked that the hardest part of my day was probably resetting a computer program or dealing with a glitchy projector screen. He openly belittled my uniform, suggesting that the Air Force had gone soft by letting people like me pretend to be part of the warrior class. I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten as I gripped my water glass, watching Marcus remain uncharacteristically quiet. Every instinct told me to keep my mouth shut, to let the insult pass as I always did, but the relentless, public humiliation finally pushed me past my breaking point. "Oh, so you think you're ready for the big leagues now, huh?" My father mocked, leaning across the table with a theatrical grin that demanded an audience from his friends. "If you're really out there flying the real thing instead of just playing video games with rookies, then why don't you tell us your top secret call sign? Give us the big name they gave you in the sky." The table fell completely silent, his buddies grinning, waiting for me to stutter or make up some embarrassing nickname. I didn't blink. I set my fork down, leaned forward until I was just inches away from his face, and let the ambient noise of the restaurant fade into the background. I dropped my voice to a sharp, icy whisper, ensuring only the men at our table could hear the words. "Shadow Watch," I said calmly. The reaction was instantaneous. Across the mahogany table, Marcus froze mid-breath. His hand jerked violently, causing his heavy glass to slip from his fingers and slam against the table, splashing amber liquid everywhere. The smug, confident smile he had worn all evening evaporated, and the color drained entirely from his face, leaving him looking ghost-white and visibly shaken. He didn't just look surprised, he looked deeply terrified, his chest heaving as he stared at me like he was looking at a phantom. His eyes darted frantically from my face down to the flight crest on my uniform, his fingers trembling against the damp tablecloth. "No way," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking into a dry, breathless whisper as he turned his panicked gaze toward my completely stunned father. "Coles, you don't understand. She's him." He knew exactly who I was. My father's laughter died instantly, replaced by a tense confusion as he looked between his trembling friend and my calm expression. "Marcus, what the hell are you talking about?" my dad muttered, his arrogant tone finally faltering. Marcus didn't look at him. His eyes remained locked on me, filled with a profound, reverent awe. "6 months ago, Coles," Marcus began, his voice shaking as he forced the words out. "My team was entirely compromised in the mountains near the northern border. It was a complete setup. We were totally surrounded by over 200 enemy fighters, pinned down in a crumbling stone compound with 0 extraction options. We were completely out of ammunition, bleeding out, and the command center told us that air support was impossible due to a massive, blinding Category 4 mountain storm." Marcus took a ragged breath, the memory visibly tearing through him. We sat there holding our last grenades, waiting for the end. Then, out of absolutely nowhere, the radio crackled once. No name, no transponder signal, just a whisper. "Shadow Watch is on station." Through a storm that should have torn any aircraft apart, a single black shadow dropped out of the clouds, flying dangerously low, completely blind. They tore through that valley like the wrath of God, unleashing an impossibly precise, devastating curtain of fire that wiped out the entire enemy perimeter in a single, sweeping pass. They didn't hit a single one of us. That ghost of a pilot broke every protocol, risked their life, and pulled my entire team out of the jaws of death. For 6 months, I've been trying to find the man who saved us, and she's sitting right here. The silence that followed was suffocating, heavy enough to drown out the entire restaurant. My father sat paralyzed, his fork hovering inches from his plate, his mouth slightly open. The arrogant smirk that had been etched onto his face for decades was completely gone, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. He looked at Marcus, his legendary warrior buddy, and then looked back at me, his eyes wide as the reality finally began to pierce through his stubborn pride. The man he idolized was trembling because of the daughter he had spent a lifetime dismissing. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus pushed his chair back from the table. Standing at absolute attention right in the middle of the crowded steakhouse, he raised his trembling right hand to his brow and delivered the crispest, most respectful military salute I had ever seen. The surrounding tables fell quiet, watching the hardened Navy SEAL honor a 32-year-old woman. Marcus lowered his hand, turned directly to my father, and spoke with a fierce, unwavering intensity. "Coles, you need to open your eyes," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the remaining noise. "Your daughter isn't playing games in a classroom. She is the most lethal, highly respected combat pilot in the entire United States military. If it weren't for her bravery, I wouldn't be standing here eating dinner with you tonight. You should be on your knees thanking her." My father swallowed hard, his face turning a deep crimson as he stared down at his hands, completely defeated by the truth. The drive home that night was the quietest 20 minutes my father and I had ever shared. For 32 years I had chased his approval, but as the headlights cut through the dark highway, I realized I didn't need it anymore. He didn't say much, just a quiet, broken apology as he pulled into the driveway, his voice thick with a new, profound reverence. Our relationship permanently shifted that evening, moving away from his harsh condescension and into a space of deep, unspoken respect. He finally saw me for who I truly was. I learned that you don't need to shout your achievements to the world or fight every critic you face. Sometimes, letting your actions speak for themselves is the most powerful victory you can ever achieve. Now, I'm incredibly curious about all of you who have followed my story to the very end. What would you do if your own family completely underestimated your capabilities and dismissed your life's passion? Have you ever had a moment where you finally proved everyone wrong? Please comment below with your thoughts and let me know the city you are watching from, so I can see exactly how far my story has reached. Meanwhile, I am leaving 2 other incredible, high-stakes stories on the final screen right now. They are absolute channel favorites, and I guarantee they will completely surprise you with their twists. Thank you so much for watching all the way through, and I will see you in the next video.